Excited there. Hey, everyone. Good to see you guys. I can't believe this is week 5. We've been doing this. So, by the way, I said 6 weeks. I'll keep going until I run out of StrengthsFinder themes, and as long as you guys want to keep showing up. So don't worry about that. I feel like going through the themes is more important than me trying to cram them in as much as I can. So, as you have questions today, again, just unmute yourself. Let me know. We'll kind of dive in. I'm going to kind of take the same tact again, where it's going to try to find different. I'm going to ask Katie to kind of feed me some themes. So if you want to kind of put those in the chat, Katie, you can drop those to me because I can't see the chat. But and what I'll do is I'll pick themes. We'll compare and contrast. So if you offer up a theme, I'll go ahead and be like, okay, well, here's one that contrasts with that. Because I was talking to someone last week, just an idea to keep in mind in the midst of some of this, is that if you think of it as StrengthsFinder themes, almost like I say ingredients in a recipe, right? They interact in the recipe, but so counteract each other. And so, right, if you take extremely hot salsa, that's really spicy, and you add to it sour cream, the basis of the cream counteracts some of the spice of the chili in the salsa. That chili powder that's in the salsa. They interact that way. And so people often think of StrengthsFinder themes by themselves, or I have strategic, you have strategic. And so the classic example of this is adaptability, which I've talked about before. Adaptability by itself, very flexible. We haven't talked about that. I'll get to it when we cover it. It's very flexible, almost boundaryless, hyper responsive to the world. But when I mix in responsibility, consistency, analytical, deliberative, suddenly that flexibility is boundaried by a demand of, I have to keep a promise. I have to be cautious. I have to be intentional. So these chemicals of like StrengthsFinder themes, they interact with each other. So I want to give you my thinking into how these kind of blend. So Katie, what do we have? What do you think? What's off with?
Let's start off for Marsha.
I'm sorry. Say again.
Belief.
Okay. Belief. Sweet. Let me share my iPad so you guys can see my scribbles while I scribble. Sweet. And if you guys want to go ahead and mute while we're on here, that'd be cool. Thank you. All right. So we'll start with belief. Actually, I'm gonna loop this in. I'll do belief in self. Do we do self-assurance? Have we done self-assurance? We have assurance, have we? No. I'm gonna tie in belief assurance in enough. It's not typically thought of that way, but okay. Here's the deal. Let me actually one more thing. I need to see more of y'all. So let me do this. Nope. All right, there you guys are. All right, so belief. Belief is a theme that lives their life by a code. The essence of belief is like code or core values. So on one level, it's really interesting is that it will let, when it comes to belief can show up in ways where it's a lot of conviction. Like I always say, belief is the foundation you build your house on, right? It's nothing in the house exists outside of the foundation. So while you may not see the foundation of the house, everything else builds on it. So it's typically, I like to kind of focus and say, there's 4 core values. Well, it can be whatever you decide those core values are. So I will meet people who are deeply relational, but the rest of their themes may not fall into the relational category. Why? Because one of their core values might be people. One of their core values might be family. And so belief, there's a game in the United States called Uno, where you have like a wild card, and you can put it down and say, of the 4 colors, it can be whatever color you want it to be. That is a little bit like belief. There is some commonality between themes of belief where people will kind of recognize, oh, it's very similar, that family is often in there, faith, different experiences. But what you might realize is that it can also be more specific. How you treat children, how you treat animals. So it's core values. So belief, it ends up, I think, in a working theme because it brings a lot of conviction. People with belief, the things they choose to do, they really dive into. So the essence is kind of this core values. When it comes to communication, there's two different things to think about. One, they will communicate incredibly strong if they believe it. So there's a lot of strength in what they say. Things that they feel strongly about, they can be hyper expressive about. But you may find with belief that on things that you don't care about, you don't say anything. You're like, nah, it's fine, whatever. But then all of a sudden, someone does something that bumps into one of your values, and you're up in their grill, and you're like, what just happened? That's shock. What just? And you can be really laid back, and then somebody bumps that, and you're just done. So when it comes to communication, what you say is going to be incredibly important. But here's the other thing: they believe with belief that everything they choose communicates about them. So what you'll find is that in the meetings, you may have an idea and you're like, well, I think we as a team should do this. And people are like, yes, absolutely, that's great. And belief might be slowed if you don't have other decision-making themes, might be actually slowed to get on board because their brain is going, what would it say about what we believe? So belief is very intentional that what they're a part of, what things they sign up for, things they agree to. Many times for belief, you feel the burden of, I work at this company has done this, it says something about me. So when it comes to communication, they're strong and aggressive with their communication if it's things they care about, but they're always aware that their life communicates. Who has belief here? Does anybody, give me a hand raise if you got belief. Anyone I can see? Belief? Dwight's got belief, a couple others. When it comes to belief, one of the things I talk about when it comes to decision-making, absent a decision-making theme, meaning strategic, arranger, deliberative, restorative, those kind of themes that are navigating, absent that, belief becomes your decision-making theme. You choose and decide based on, does it reflect my values or not? So on big decisions, you may find that you navigate really well because you're like, when you're setting a new direction. But if you have been in the same role for a while, if you have been on track to do something very specifically for a long period, you may be out of practice. One way I've described belief over the years is that belief when they make decisions is like a little kid playing memory. Think about little kids with the cards all over the table. It's a game, for those of you who may not have seen it before, where there's all these cards with faces and you lay them out and you turn it over and it's like, oh, it's an apple. You turn over another card, it's a banana, no match. But you're trying to create matches, right? And so now they have Disney characters or whatever. I guess the game's a different game. Belief plays a game of memory, looking for matches, where the face card never changes. They have a card, they get to 25, they figure out who they are, and they're like, this is me. So their life in decision-making is a game of flipping over cards, going, does it match? Yes. Does it match? No. Great. And they go on. If your experience is one where you have not had to make decisions in a while, and you're going, well, now I've got to find new opportunities. I've lost my job. My job has changed. What does this mean? And you haven't in a long time had to play this game. You know about finding cards. So you start looking, opportunities. The problem is that you can forget or lose or get covered up in the noise, your face card. So you've lost this, but what you're doing is, okay, here's a choice. Does it match? Well, to have a match, you need two cards. So your body knows it's not, so you're like, here's an option. It seems like it should be a match, but it doesn't feel like a match. So you let go. Another option, match. No, another option, it doesn't. and nothing seems to satisfy. Belief, if you have belief in your top 10 and belief is strong for you, you need to stop hunting for options and instead do the work to go, wait a minute, how clear am I on my core card? That core card, once that's clear, choices become easy. Don't need that, do need that, don't need that, don't need that. Because what's happened is, if you've forgotten why you started, you won't know if you can navigate anymore. So do the work on that. So belief when it comes to essence is core values. When it comes to communication, it's strong, and they believe their life communicates. When it comes to decision making, same thing. Their decisions have to reflect their values. So decision making reflects values, whatever. There you go, values. Okay, the dark side is people with belief. So dark side. People with belief are shocked that people don't believe what they believe. They're assured of their belief. And so what that means is that they're convinced. Why? Because if what they believe isn't possibly true for everyone, how can it just be true? It has to be true. And so they get conviction and they're sure they're right. So essence is core values. Communication is strong, like aggressive communication about those four things. Their decision-making always reflects their values. The dark side is the assumption that they are right and that everyone agrees. The reason I usually compare this with self-assurance as a theme is self-assurance is belief on steroids. Okay? If belief starts from their core values, their four values, and they're strong on that, self-assurance at its essence is internally driven. People with self-assurance, it's not just the four things that are true, it's whatever they believe to be true on any subject. They're internally motivated. One of the things I find is that, I often say the world, if you don't have themes like significance, self-assurance, command, maximizer, competition, the real driving, influencing themes, you may find that, I like to say, the majority of the world is actually like a sailboat versus a motorboat. Think of a sailboat. A sailboat uses external factors for motion. So if I'm a sailboat and I'm in San Diego, California, and I want to go west, I can't simply leave San Diego Harbor, go past Coronado and Point Loma, and just point my bow and say, okay, I'm going west. A sailboat doesn't just pick a direction and go. A sailboat picks a direction, it reads the wind, it reads the waves, and then it does what's called tacking, right? It goes one direction, then another, to get in the direction it wants to go. A motorboat doesn't care about the wind or the wave. Why? Because the wind and waves have nothing to do with it. It's self-propelled. And so what they do is they point their bow, they pick a direction, and then they go. They don't care what the wind is doing. They don't care about the currents. What is interesting is we really like motorboats when the storms of life come at us. We like the comfort and the assurance of self-assurance when things are uncertain. We like their confidence. We like that internal piece, because people with self-assurance, the external world doesn't matter, because truth is truth. So they point in. We love their assurance in times of uncertainty. We can struggle with it when we realize that self-assurance doesn't need my opinion. Self-assurance doesn't feel the need to ask what I think, because what I think is irrelevant. What? How could you not want my opinion? Surely you want to know my, nope. I remember getting a haircut one time, and I had an intern named Jason who had self-assurance, and we were racing to do an event at Loyola in LA. And And I, Cavington Cities, we stopped at a random mall. I got a random haircut when I had hair at the time. And I remember asking Jason when I got off the plane, because it was a random person, hey, does my hair look stupid? Because I'd never had this haircut before or whatever. And Jason looked at me and he laughed in my face. And I was like, what are you laughing at? And he was like, in my life, he said, I have never asked anyone what they think of my hair. And I was like, of course you have. He's like, no. Why would I think it? Why would I care what you think of my hair? That's self-assurance. Self-assurance looks internally for truth. So the focus is going to be internally driven. Their communication will always be about their opinion. Their opinion. Okay? The decision-making, same thing. Decision-making, always their truth. Their truth. The dark side then ends up being the fact it is very difficult to get them to listen. They're focusing on themselves. So for self-assurance, I always say, tell me who you listen to. Tell me who you're willing to listen to. And it's interesting, this is also true for belief. When coronavirus kicked in about 3 or 4 weeks ago, before this all kind of like a couple weeks right before the 12th. So between like the last of February, 1st of March, I started encountering a couple different people at different sites as I was working who were like, oh, this is crazy. There's no need for this, da, 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 da. And that was when it was really, there was a lot of polarizing language in politics, right and left. And so you could hear different voices, not versus serious, whatever. But then as it kind of got, voices started merging and the right and left and are saying, hey, everybody stay home, take care of each other, the voices changed. But I realized that belief in self-assurance, I kept asking the question. And they're like, well, this is still overblown. This is still crazy. And I was like, so it's not politics. It's not news. And I remember saying, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not being crazy myself. Could you tell me, seriously, what source would have to change its mind and you'd have to hear in order to believe that this was different? And they're like, I just don't like to be told what to do. That was the end again. That it was about source, it was about what they believe to be true. So that ends up mattering. So that's self-assurance and belief. What's my next ones, Katie?
We've got restorative was a hot request.
Okay. All right, restorative. I'll hit restorative. I'm going to kind of allude back to strategic again, because we did strategic a couple weeks ago. Yeah, we did strategic. So because strategic and restorative are different pieces of a coin. So restorative, the core essence, the essence of restorative is made whole, restored. The root word is restore. Restoration implies that there is a core way something should be, and it needs to be restored back to that. So restorative believes nothing is too broken to be fixed. Any problem can be solved. And so they have typically seen chaos in their life somewhere, or they've seen someone who's gone through chaos. And what happens is they're like, how do I put the pieces back together? And they've seen it happen. I had a kid one time who was, his dad was a client, and I didn't know his dad's personal story, but he said, I have a son that I had when I was a teenager. Would you go? And now he's getting ready to graduate college. And I remember talking to him, and he was getting ready to go to medical school. And I asked, we're talking through his themes, and he had restorative. And he asked me something, and I was early in my years of doing this. He said, Mike, do you think I have restorative? Because when I was 6 years old, my mom took me and I lived in a car. She was a drug addict. We were homeless for a month, and I lived in a car for a whole month. He's like, and now I'm going to law school. He said, do you think, he's like, so when people tell me how screwed up their world is, I just go, I've seen worse. Now, that's obviously a very extreme story, but literally people who've lost family members, or they remember they had extreme poverty as a kid, or difficult divorces, what can happen is under 25, you've experienced something difficult, and you're like, oh, as an adult, I didn't die. I'm still here. And so what happens is restorative, your gift is that you believe almost anything can be put back together. What most of the world is scared to death that they're beyond hope. So if we're a train wreck, we are completely drawn to you because we want to borrow your belief until we find our own. So people who are scary, we're like, you are unafraid of mess. So because you believe we can be restored. I'll be like, is this okay? Do you really believe it's going to be all right? Restorative says, Mike, listen, if you would just do this, this, and this, it's going to be okay. Restorative is decision-making for solutions. Restorative and strategic are different. Strategic will remove the closest roadblock because it's closest. Restorative says, here's what the real core problem is. So strategic will say, this house is on fire. Oh my goodness, I have to put out this house. And you're saying, Mike, but I need you down here. No. This house is on fire. I have to put out this house. Restorative is the one shouting, Mike, the entire street is on fire. Don't put out that house. Knock over the fire hydrants on the entire street to put out all the houses. And so restorative is a much bigger wholeness versus symptom fixing. Strategic is more roadblock. Restorative goes, how do I put these pieces back together? But restorative has a radar for problems before they even happen. If restorative is dominant for you, if you see something, it will almost always turn out the way you think it will. Have I talked about the lens and driving towards the ravine? Have I done that story? Like, hey, okay. The way I describe restorative is this. Imagine restorative has a better pair of glasses than I do. So I don't know who has restorative, but if you do out there, I'm gonna pick somebody. I'll pick Matt Mendoza. So Matt, let's imagine Matt has restorative and I don't, and I'm driving down the road. Matt has he can see further down the road than I can because he has restorative. And while I'm driving and talking, Matt says, hey, Mike, you better slow down. The bridge is out. And I look up and I can't see a bridge. I'm like, I can't even see a ravine. I'm like, Matt, you're so negative. Why are you so negative? Why are you always pointing out problems that aren't even there yet? And so while I'm berating him about his negativity, I then suddenly look back at the road and realize I'm now approaching a ravine that has no bridge. He was right, and I have to swerve off the road. And when I do, I blow a tire. Now, I have command. If you ignore my advice, if I'm the one giving advice, and you do your own blow a tire, I'm like, you chose, good luck with that. No, I'm not that bad, but something like that. Restorative, though, you tell them they're too negative, you ignore them, and blow a tire because of it, but you know what? Restorative won't abandon you. You know what they do? They get it up the tire iron and they help you change the tire. But here's what's crazy. Over time, restorative, I don't know how many of you out there have this, but here's the deal. You typically get sick of being told you're negative. So after a while, you stop saying the bridge is out and you just sit there in the chair quietly with a tire iron under your seat. Because you know you just have to play cleanup. And so you're still there to help, but you stop saying what you see. Restorative, please, I know it's hard sometimes. We need to hear what you see. If you are healthy, meaning you're not being too self-focused, you're not exhausted, you're not burned out, and you see something, you ignore yourself at your own peril. Do not ignore restorative. If restorative says it's gonna be bad, it's gonna be bad. So restorative, just so you know, problems aren't negative for them. We will put the negative label on you. But when they communicate, restorative sees the gap between wholeness and where we are. So they communicate with an eye for problems. If I'm scared of a problem, that sounds negative to me. When it comes to decision making, the focus is going to be on solutions, not symptoms. They don't like symptom fixing. And so they are like, that you can see it, people making decisions and you're like, that's like handing tissues to a person with pneumonia. Like that doesn't work. They need medicine. Restorative, your priority is that. Ultimately, the dark side is that it's hard to value and that you aren't mission critical. Like I know teachers where the kids, the poorest of the poor or the most difficult, that people with restorative, they will struggle with people they think, oh, that's not real, it's not a real problem. Actually, everyone has problems, even if your financial situation is different. And so restorative, the dark side is that it's like, I don't know who I am. I have to help. I have to help. You know you're kind of moved into the dark side, restorative, if you do not know how to relate people without being the person helping. Relationships that aren't helping based can be a challenge. People that you just feel okay being with, that you don't know how to engage. That's not your natural default. So if you are in that helping stuck spot, that's more about, that's you, it's interesting. Also, you can come off negative. If over time, you're like, I don't go downwards that I see problems on because I've lost confidence in my ability to navigate them, that's also a sign. So a dark side, you can be negative when this goes too far, when this theme gets out of balance. That's restorative. Essence, making things whole, communication with an eye on a problem. They decision make, looking for solutions. The dark side is that they can get overly focused on who am I, because I have to be the one to help. What else have I got, Katie?
Yeah, just so you know, Sean and Jessica have restorative. They really related. And also Sean was talking about it being difficult if your immediate supervisor doesn't know that about you or trust that.
Yeah, yeah, because that's a big thing, because they don't know to trust the radar you see, Sean, and they also don't know, like, they don't know why you're bringing it up. We will make the assumption, oh, so for me, I bring up problems as reasons not to do something. They problem, we have to navigate this. So I'll put on Sean this label, oh, well, you're being negative, instead of going, saying I have to navigate. So
yeah,
thanks, Katie.
Is communicating with that supervisor or that person who doesn't understand us, like, are there key words to throw out, or does it really matters what their strengths are and then what their temperament is in order to communicate so that they get us quicker?
One thing I'm one thing a lot these days with regards to like restorative, strategic, deliberative, see with your restorative, but speak with any other emotional or theme you have. So Sean, you have, as an example, give me something else in your. You're on mute again. Sorry.
Sorry, I do have communication, so that's a
Yeah.
good one.
So my thing is, remember what happens is with the restorative is you see it and you see it quickly. You see these themes of performance, arranger, strategic, deliberative, restorative. You see things fast.
Yeah.
Instantly give feedback. Just so you know, you're almost always speaking out of that theme. I'm telling people more and more. I did this yesterday with the U.S. Olympic Committee, all these coaches I'm working with. I'm like, see with your restorative, speak with your communication, your relator, your futuristic. Filter it back. Go, you know what? I can grab a different theme. Because Sean, if you're like, okay, I have communication, I need to give him a narrative. Hey, listen, here's what I see. Here's the story I know you're wanting to tell. And then here's problems. It doesn't at all sound like you're leading with the problem. If you lead with the restorative, it sounds like I'm just giving him the problem. And now I'm going to judge you for it because my brain reacts that way. See with one piece, communicate with another, if that helps anybody. And that's the truth for all of us. With regards to giving feedback or communicate bosses who don't have our themes, don't just see and communicate with that theme. Work on, okay, I see this, but I also have developer. So I see that problem. Let's say you have a developer. You're like, okay, wait a minute. What piece should I give them right now? And that's the point of learning your strength themes. Start to realize, wait, I can pull pieces, just knowing intention. What's my next one?
So Matt hit us with a classic relator versus woo.
Ooh, that's really good. That's actually that's really helpful. Okay, I'm gonna do relator and woo together, and I'll break it into pieces. So if woo goes to a party, it meets 100 people. It might meet 100 people. If relator goes to a party, it might talk to 5. If individualization goes to the same party, they might talk to 1 and be quite content. Now, if you have multiple of these themes together, you're going to find that woo means you kind of go into the party, work the room to find the 5 or the 1. And so you start with, hey, it's so great. But as the night wears on, gravitate towards people you can have more intimate conversations with. So if I do this right here, this woo, the essence of woo is social intelligence. Intelligence, whatever. Yeah, that's great. Woo, social intelligence. So that means that you relate groups, trying to be positive, trying to be engaging, trying to necessarily think about how can I socially get people to engage. The essence is a socialness. Woo by itself can be one of these themes where it's very, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you, in an effort to make you feel welcome. And for those of you who don't know, woo stands for winning others over. So woo stands for winning. So it's winning others over. That's kind of winning. And so if you think about winning is the main piece of this, winning others, making them feel welcomed, greeting them, hi, are you? Nice to meet you. But I've met woo who are like, yeah, and I can't remember their name in 10 minutes. Like they'll ask for their name to make you feel welcome, not because they actually need to know it. Hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you. So woo by itself, some people describe it as greasy. I was in a small group one time and this woman's like, I just hate people with woo, ignoring the fact that other people on her brand new team woo. So woo is an influence theme. It wins you over, it makes you feel comfortable. It's so when it comes to communication, comms, it's almost always positive and group focused. Meaning, hi, how are you? It's welcoming. So woo does well on stages. They know how to open an event. I always tease them that the fact that woo knows how to open a talk, a workshop, a conference. They're not really good at closing. They're way better on the front end than they are the back. And so landing the plane is more difficult. So if you're writing a talk or making a presentation, they're like, this should make such a great opening. It'll get the crowd's attention. But they don't think about how they're going to close and land the plane, because it's the opening that's way more exciting. Does that sound right, Matt, as you're laughing your head off? And so you're way better at kind of engaging and being kind of out there in the front. So when you communicate, that's going to be the thing. How do I think about group, mass, when it comes to what will reach the greatest number of people? That's the priority. When it comes to decision making with woo, decision making, it's going to be about how do I encourage people even in the difficulty? So what is the most encouraging? So I have woo, in case you couldn't tell. So for me, I'm like, how do I encourage people? How do I get out there? How do I reach the most people, encouraging them? Okay. The hard part, the dark side for me with woo is what happens when people need to be one. Sometimes people need to be one. They don't want to be. And so the dark side, what am I winning to? What am I winning them to? If it's all about me and I'm trying to make you like me, that's a self-defeating spot. Then I have to go, what if I don't get reaction? The number of times I always laugh. The best way for me to decrease my email subscriber list is to send out my weekly email. I lose 1 to 4 email subscribers every time I send it out. Now, every now and again, I get people saying that was great, but I hardly get feedback. And my coach is always saying to me, Mike, why don't you create stuff you like to create, whether anybody reads it or not? And I have to admit that with woo, sometimes the challenge is we like to be read and have the response more than we like to write. And that can be the challenge, is that you're like, oh gosh, Christina knows this. I wrote a book in 2018, and for a variety of factors, it just didn't sell. It wasn't Christian enough for the Christians. It wasn't a business enough for the business. And so I was left in limbo. I wrote a book that nobody wanted to read. It's a pretty book. I mean, a bunch of people obviously thought so, but like the biggest for me was processing through, but I wrote it because I wanted to write it. It was good enough for me. But that took work. Didn't know how to show up in the dark side. So lack of response is the dark side of woo. We don't like to show up and go, we feel like we're shouting into the void. Now, relator is different. Relator is about relationship. At its core, real relationship. They prefer real conversation to small talk. They would rather talk to you about real things. They would rather hear about your life. For relators, they often say to me, there's nothing more satisfying than quality time with people they don't have to explain themselves to. Relators are often, here's the interesting thing, relators typically have many acquaintances but few friends. Because the word friend is often reserved for a group of people who've earned the right to be called friend. And it's usually less than 8. Depends on if you have woo, right? Because this depends on other themes. It might be broader with other themes, but true relators find that they're like, yeah, my world has known me since I was 10. These are my real friends, and it's core. Does that make sense? And so relators project intimacy, meaning they project relational safety. So relators, how many of you have it? But relators, have you ever found that near strangers too much personal information? You meet them casually somewhere and look at them, and I'll pick on Christina, she has it. Christina, and hi, how are you? The way you is it's something about the way you tilt your head, the way relator says it. Suddenly, I have internet connections. All of a sudden, I say, Christina really wants to know how I am. Oh my gosh. So tell Christina everything. Then a moment later, I have shared too much personal information. I go, hey, Christina, I just told you all my personal stories. Now you tell me all of yours. And relators are like, no. Because while they make us feel safe, they themselves are extremely private. Their inner world is reserved for those that have known them well. So they prefer groups. Time is a huge factor. Relators will tell you they relate differently on a team at month 12 than they do at month 1. Because their brain is like, what will this person be like through all the seasons? Relators at work and in coaching are often accused of having favorites. Because if you've worked with someone the longest, you have more of a communication shorthand with them. Notice. So group teams are usually less than 10. 6 is kind of perfect. But if the group gets too big, it doesn't feel like you can be as relational as you want to be. So any change to the small group dynamic can be disruptive, and it'll take you almost 12 months to reset in some ways, if this is a dominant theme for you. When it comes to communication, the essence of relator is actually relationship and team, almost team. When it comes to communication, the is going to be on team and authenticity. They don't go in fake. They don't like casual. What do we really, when it comes to decision-making, the focus of being on what is good for the group. And again, not flat, intimate, and you know, the dark side. What's the dark side of relator? It can be, resist people. My refined on when you're the worst, you're like, no, we 4 and no more. I'm all up. I don't. And so you find that you actually kind of aren't welcoming. You don't want to let people group. Here's the thing. Here's a dark side. Typical. You have to be careful about people. Relators kind of have like a really strong wall castle. What they say, wait a minute, I'm going to hold you out and keep you in a until I'm sure I know who you are. Then, when I finally have decided I'm okay, I open the gate of my compound. I let you in. Well, now relators are almost defenseless against people inside because they put all their effort in the external wall. So what they find is things that when I've met couples who they're like, it was a big shift because things that they had good defenses against when they were dating, they would make a comment that they were totally, they are suddenly defenseless against when they're married. And they're like, well, I said that to you all the time when we're dating, that didn't bother you. But now that we're like on the inside, like the relator goes, I thought you were safe. I've also had experiences with relators who had close friends that they were thought fine and great. They'd known them a long time, let them into their world. And suddenly that person, their spouse or acts negative or something. And relators are like, what just happened? And they feel, it's interesting. I've had relators say that a disruption in relationships have a direction at work. It's like they're close friends. Because what is your brain is so confident in its ability to assess a person being stable or not. That when suddenly you've assessed someone and yes, they're safe, they're who they are, and you've lived in this for a number of years, and suddenly they do something that calls into question what you saw, and you're caught off guard, relators' brains go, how could I have not seen that? Well, wait a minute. If my decision-making wasn't sound there, what if it's not sound there? And what if it's not here? And how do I know? It's like your compass is gone. So now you're questioning, how do I know what decisions I'm making? And so I will have people who will be in distress and not realize it's because their best friend just told you that they cheated on their spouse and you didn't know, or their best friend did something that was so hurtful you couldn't imagine it. And you don't know why your own world feels unmoored. Because relators, it's your brain trying to trust, oh, I should have seen that. That's not your obligation. All you can do is love those people, your responsibility to take on their pain. How do I reset? Here's what I saw. That is that person, even if their choice match that. Cool. What else have I got? So woo is social, big relate, more team, small group. About 15 more minutes, Katie.
Yeah, and just so you know, your sometimes lack of feedback in the group chat, it's blowing up with like, yes, 100%, preach it. So thanks, Mike. Hey, how about sticking with relationship building? We had harmony as a request.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. Harmony. Okay, harmony, the essence of harmony is efficiency. Now, this sounds a little different for those of you who know Gallup themes. The reason I say this is, think about efficiency. Efficiency is about things moving well together, like things that are clearly moving in the right direction, and especially conflict free, okay? Free. Why does that matter? Think about harmony in music. Harmony in music is two notes that are properly spaced so they don't conflict. They sound better together than they do apart. So what I found is when you read Gallup's definition, it spins into relationship. Oh, you don't like conflict. You like consensus. You like win-win. Yes, all of that is true. But a number of years ago, actually, I remember the first time I mentioned this the other day. I don't know. I've done so many groups now. I'm losing track. Lou Perez, who was at the time was the CFO for the Detroit Lions. Lou kept identifying harmony as his dominant theme in what is truly a high finance role. And he's like, well, harmony is my dominant theme. And I was like, how is that possible? Like, it's not relational. And he's like, I love to watch the numbers move across the books without losing any. I like the efficient organization. And so you may find that harmony is actually about the efficient interaction of things. And so it can be about people. I want people to get along, but it can also be about organizing. And so how do I organize and plan? And so for harmony, when it comes to essence, it's efficient and conflict free. When they communicate, they kind of, I always say they circle you. They circle. This is the way Harmony tells you they didn't like your comment in the meeting. They come by your desk and they're like, hey, Grace, how are you today? And then I move on and I leave. Later on, I'm like, kind of a really crazy day out there today. It's like 60 degrees. And Grace is like, yep. And then I move on. And then like an hour later, kind of a really hard conversation today in the meeting, wasn't it? Yeah. And then I move on. And so around 4 o'clock, I finally say, so Grace, when you said you didn't know why my team was, here's the things that we, see, I had to circle her all day to get her to the point where I could finally say the thing that I needed to say. Here's the key: without creating conflict. I communicate to communicate without conflict. So at that point, Grace is like, yeah, Mike, whatever, I'm cool. I don't care. Like, she doesn't even know because I've been circling her all day, but I had avoiding conflict. And so I wasn't sure. So I circle and I circle. So just so you know, it's often indirect. Indirect. So that means, that scribble means. So communication, they from the side. This can drive strategic, command, some of these other themes crazy a little bit. Like, why aren't you going faster? Guess what? Put down your hands, stop being so aggressive, and maybe they'll come faster to you. Harmony, it's never going to be as bad as you think it is, so you can speed it up. But they communicate around you. They're trying to figure out how to get to you and get it done without priorities, without creating conflict. Decision making is about win-win. They prioritize things that will create the great amount of positive impact for the greatest number of people. They believe there must be a way that makes them feel as good as we do. And so others are like, well, no, there will always be losers. You know, different maximizer competition may feel that. And so they will also prioritize solutions that don't create conflict. So for them, conflict is a sign of poor planning. What's interesting is, so like I have Activator. For Activator, one of the benefits is conflict because there's learning in it. So Activator says, hey, if things screw up, we're going to learn something else. Harmony goes, if you can't plan it without creating conflict, you don't know what you're doing. And so they feel that tension. The dark side ends up being the fact that you can end up losing yourself to please others. You can avoid a moment that's really important because you just don't want to have the conflict. And so avoidance of pain can end up being your direction. If you suddenly go, how do I go somewhere that won't get me pain? I'll just concede whatever I want on the altar of I don't waves. When in reality, instead of passive harmony, what you really need is active. Active says, listen, you can work with you this way, and you pull the teams together. That's what needs to happen. Is that how do you start to say, I stand in the middle, and instead of you being the person to bridge the gap, you bring them in. That's what you're trying to accomplish. And so active harmony, not passive. Essence is conflict and is lack of conflict and efficiency. Communication is going to be circling to create engagement without conflict. They prioritize win-wins. Dark side, losing yourself and sacrificing yourself to the point of your own exhaustion to please other people. What else, Katie?
Cool. Maybe last one. How about from Greg and Abdullah, ideation?
Oh, perfect. Okay, ideation. So when it comes to thinking themes, ideation, the essence is creative thinking. It's true creative thinking. And so it's like one idea hooks to another idea, which hooks to another idea, which hooks to another idea, and so on everything. So I give you one thought and I'm going this direction, but that idea is this idea, and then it goes here, and you're like, wait, what just happened? So ideation is outside the box thinking. It's true innovation. Interesting, ideation and strategic They go together. Strategic, that's a scribble. Ideation, strategic, ends up being, strategic is making decisions to remove roadblocks. Ideation says, how do I remove roadblocks in ways I've never removed them before? They don't want to just find an answer. They want the creative answer. Oddly enough, strategic ideation will say to me, oh yeah, some nights I just drive home from work, back in the days when we drove to work, a different way every night because I hated to drive the same way. So strategic by itself says, how do I make things? Strategic ideation says, yeah, but let's innovate the decision. Well, some people with achiever and responsibility are going, can we do what we know works? Strategic ideation is like, well, it's boring. So ideation is creative thinking. And so interesting is that when they communicate, you might find that they find tangents. They'll connect, you know, what you're saying, just like what you're saying here, and it's just this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it's just, but they have in mind connected like this through this one idea to this idea. And so at times you may find that they're pulling together different ideas. What is interesting is that if there's 1,000 ideas all up here, ideation is like a funnel sometimes. It can go, of all these ideas, that one's the core idea. Here it is, here's the core. They can actually do the opposite. Give them one idea and they go, well, you know what? That could be this and this and this. They go a whole different direction. That's what ideation does. It's the ability to multiply ideas. So they tangent or multiply, actually, multiply. And so that's what's actually happening here, is that they're communicating what the idea is. When it comes to decision-making is going to be about possibilities. What gives them the most possibilities, the most options, the most choices? And so you'll feel, the ideation feels this at the end of this. They have something in their head they think they're going to say. Somebody says something that fires an idea. And then they, well, I'll step back, because someone's surely going to, they wait. And the meeting goes and the meeting goes. As the meeting gets closer to an end, they feel this gnawing thing inside of them. They can feel making a decision. And the window is getting narrower and narrower. And like, maybe I should. And right before the decision, they can't take it anymore. And they go, what about this? And people are like, oh, you're bringing it up. Because you're waiting. Possibility versus closure. Ideation, bring your ideas out in the decision-making process early. Don't wait. Give us your creativity in the front side. But then really, somebody's going to have to pick. And so, the decision-making priority is possibilities. The dark side, distraction. Is become too distracted because everything is creative to you. So right now, being in lockdown in your own house can be exhausting because there's not enough variety. You're not getting enough stimulation, seeing people, driving places. It's not even intentional. Just being exposed to the world helps ideation to process their world. Well, so under that situation, you have to work to limit. It's like, if I get too exposed, I'm going to think too much. So for you, how do you go, I'm going to choose what I let in? Because once it's in, you can't help but react to it. So you have to focus on limiting what comes in. That's the key. Because once it's gone, once it's in your head, it's going to do what it's going to do. You're going to have to find ways. I don't read I don't read news this time of day. I don't go here. I don't do this. I do this. I go outside when I need to brainstorm, get up from my desk and go talk to people. Ideation ends up being about creativity. Questions or comments in my last 2 minutes? You guys can unmute and just talk to me. Nobody wants to say anything. It's all good. It's okay. So, you guys, somebody's asking if anyone's keeping track of which ones we've covered. We'll have it again next week if Katie's able to help us out. We're making progress. We're getting like 6 or so. So a couple more sessions, we should be good. Again, guy knows, email me, and I've got some thoughts and pieces. If you have questions about your own profile, you can shoot them to me. But also, just so you know, as I get to the end of this, find time to chat with you about your questions. Be like, hey, like we can do. I haven't forgot you. I just have a crazy week going right now. But if you have questions or that you're like, talk to me more about these things. These seem at conflict. What does that mean? How do they work together? I'm always happy to kind of start there week to week. Does that sound good? Shoot me messages. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. You guys, I really appreciate it. It's fun seeing you every week. Again, let me know if you need anything. I'm out here.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
You're the best,
Thanks,
really.
guys.
Always